In this series, I'm searching for understanding what the plants and animals are of the dry tropics, particularly around Townsville. I'm here at the edge of James Cook University near the old entrance to the uni, and here I'm going to do some iNaturalist observations of the plants around here and tell you a little bit about the species that are here. This is, from looking around, this is actually a pretty good patch. There's a lot of native bush here without too many weeds. This is a Candelabra wattle. It has sort of soft velvety leaves, these sort of wrinkly pods, and these yellow wattle flowers. These apparently were used to for fish kill, apparently. With iNaturalist, I've been trying to capture some of the wild populations, particularly native species around Townsville. They're actually usually pretty hard to find because there's so many weeds throughout the whole region, and so it's always great when you come across a spot with quite a few native species. Here we've got a Melaleuca. This one's flowering. These have really stiff leaves and yellow flowers, and very papery bark. This is a red ash, and it's quite common throughout this area, and I've seen it as far south as Brisbane. It has these sort of glossy long leaves and a very white back on them. Usually they've got holes in the leaves as though something's been eating them. It's very common with this species. I don't know what it is that eats them, but that's also an indicator. And they have these little black berries which have a sort of a flat top on them. They start off green and then they turn black. So this plant here is also called a soap bush because the leaves give off a soapy material when they're crushed up, and they were used for fish kills. So you would collect a bunch of leaves and crush them up, and you could put that into the water, and then that would cause the fish to basically float to the surface. So I'm going to collect some leaves and we'll take them back and we'll see whether whether we can get any soapy suds out of them. Now the fruits themselves are poisonous, so they shouldn't be consumed. Before I head home, take a few photos for iNaturalist. Usually I'm looking out for any new species that I haven't seen before, and also trying to capture everything, all the species in that area. This one I haven't seen before, and after I've taken the photos, upload them through the iNaturalist iPhone app, and if I don't know what it is, I typically mark it just as a plant, and hopefully someone in the community will know what it is. Originally I started doing iNaturalist so that I could learn a little bit about the local plants, but also what I wanted to do was understand what does it take in terms of how close do you need to take photos to be able to identify plants. Partly because I was interested in what does it take to understand doing photography of coral for coral reefs, but of course the problem with coral is that it's hard to get access to lots of coral reefs, whereas plants, they're all around us, and they have similar identification problems as corals, in that you need to be able to see the whole plant as well as sometimes very fine details to determine what species they are. The last species I want to show you today is actually a major pest species, but is actually an edible fruit. This is a Chinese apple, and the Chinese apple was an introduced species, and it has these edible fruits on them that when they're ripe apparently taste a little bit like apples. These plants have spikes on them, and these fruits are picked up by birds, and they spread throughout the region. One characteristic of these is the underside of their leaves is very pale and the top side is quite dark, and they have these easy to determine veins on their leaves. Well, we found a few interesting plants today. It's always good to find some red ash. I quite like it. I saw it down in the Keppel Islands as part of a work trip, which was kind of nice to see something familiar that far south. So it's going to be interesting to see whether this actually makes any soap suds. Back, I've got the red ash, and I'm going to try and crush it up in the water and see what happens. Let's take these leaves. You see that? It's very slight amount of bubbles. Very small amount of sort of soapy action there. It feels a bit slippery, so it's kind of a little bit like a soap, so that's kind of right. I mean, the water doesn't look very soapy. So obviously it's a pretty light soap, so I'm not sure why. It's possibly a bit strong to call them soap bush. So I'm not sure you would expect to clean your hands very well. Now I'll have to go in and actually wash them. Oh.